is this the first interview or?
Yes, this is my sixth.
Nice. How's it feel so far?
Awkward.
Yeah, totally.
I'm an awkward.
It's okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I want to. It's not because I want to be on the radio. I just want people to understand that there are other ways to live.
Got it. Yes.
Yep. Like creative expansion.
Yes.
It's not a linear thing, this life.
It's true.
It's don't judge yourself too harshly because we can, that's what we do.
For sure.
And.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
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 Totally.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome to In the Act. This is a radio program on process and the creative life. Creativity does not just start and stop with artists. We all make aesthetic or guiding decisions. Our aim is to talk through the process and investigate how we choose to express ourselves and live creatively. We are connecting with people about their lives. This is the subject of our show. Broadcasting from Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin on Mead Community Radio. I am Erica Hunsinger, and this is In the Act. Today's guest is Jordan Gottsacker.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're the owner, founder, developer, creative whiz behind Honey and Ace,
yes,
which is the coolest store in Sheboygan.
Oh,
I'm sorry, that's
thank
probably,
you.
I don't want to rank or be hierarchical. It's one of my favorites, I should say.
Yeah.
It speaks to me.
It's a fun spot. Yep.
Yeah.
I like spending time there.
That's so great.
Yes. Yeah, we opened January of 2020. So, I mean, obviously there was rumblings and inklings of coronavirus and the pandemic. But at that point it wasn't called a global pandemic at that point. So we were just trudging forward, and he and I had both quit our jobs, and I had taken out a few loans, and I had just signed a 5-year lease. There was not really a backing out. So, I mean, I think it's just testament to if you're pushed into a space, backed into a corner, you'll find a way, you'll use your creativity to get yourself out of that place, and just find a way and make your own path. So
totally.
Yeah. That's really what this whole year has felt like for me.
Oh my gosh, I bet.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it's nice because I think I tend to thrive in environments that require me to put on my thinking cap, even though I'm not being asked to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously opening up a retail shop in 2020 is also kind of a weird move, societal move for living in a small town. And the job that I was in was obviously, I mean, it was a corporate job. So it was high paying. It was a salary job. It was all of the things were set for me, and the trajectory that held was a very different life than what I'm experiencing right now because of the choices that we made in January 2020.
Wow. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It's been so interesting this year to if you had known what was happening, you'd be nope, not doing it. That probably.
Perhaps, yeah. The conversations would have been a lot different, particularly with friends and family. The driving conversations up until that point were still pretty shaky. And obviously, I had never owned a business. I had never done anything like that before. So it was a lot of me trying to build myself up and tell myself that I had the guts and the just to trust myself to do it. But there were so many conversations prior to actually doing it about what the consequences would be if things didn't work out the way I thought they would.
Oh, right.
So yeah, I mean, obviously it's just kind of listening to the back and forth about what the pros and the cons are of all the situations you can potentially get into. And I think in those times prior to the pandemic, it was it wasn't really a part of the conversation. Like, oh, what if there's like this huge global wide like mass thing that causes everyone in the earth as we know it to shut down how they've been functioning as a professional, and just like totally shift gears and mindset. So yeah, it's just like the loops that we've been through are just crazy
Thoughts
to think
of
about.
Death
Yes.
every day.
Death is frequent. Yes.
Right.
Frequently in my mind. Yes, for sure.
And you know, that like that that time, it's so interesting. I mean, we're still in it, right?
Yes.
But we're emerging slowly and trying to find our footing in so many different ways too. But there were so many good things that happened because of the shutdown. It slowed things down in different ways. I think we had a lot more time for reflection, which is, you know, good and bad.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But like, do you, like the idea of having a little bit more time to develop a burgeoning business,
right?
BB,
yes,
really then allows for a different sort of thoughtfulness or engagement, I guess, that it would have been otherwise.
I think so. Yeah. Had the world continued on without that, I mean, that whole flip 180 on us, I think, the way that Honey and Ace looks today would be very different. I think we had such a heavy emphasis in the beginning on bringing community into our space. And the idea behind that and trying to make connections in person and organically through just like a like-minded, open, accepting environment that tends to be skew neutral for, I mean, as many parties as possible. So, I mean, really, we were definitely headed down a path that would have, I mean, just been a lot more focused on events and just like live energy that brings itself to a space when you're inside of it.
For sure.
So I think that was kind of one of the biggest changes and mind shifts that we experienced was like, oh shoot, how are we going to find our audience virtually, as well as like minimally trying to keep our doors open and available for people to experience, but it's going to be this very concentrated conversation between pretty much every customer that comes in. It's like a one-on-one, like you're hanging out with me, I'm hanging out with you.
Truth.
And there's not a lot of action going on. So it really dialed in like the conversations and the types of people and personalities that we were allowed to notice, I think. During the pandemic, which was awesome, because I think I tend to skew bigger, grander scale when it comes to just like thinking about the holistic nature of where I want a creative project to go, or where I want a business venture or whatever it happens to be to go. I think I tend to stand back further and worry less about the details. But this whole time has really kind of like switched that gear again and like really made me hone in on like who is here and what makes us all tick so differently, because you can really notice those different personalities shining through when you're just like standing in a shop in front of one person. The crowds are not massing in Honey and Ace at any point.
And aren't allowed to.
And are not allowed to. And I mean, we're being very safe and thoughtful about how we introduce that back into the shop now that restrictions are being lifted. But yes, it's it's been a tightrope, I would say. It has felt like kind of like walking on, just like seeing how comfortable we can get with like the going down the rabbit hole, I guess.
Right. Speaking of the mural in the in the library,
it's on my brain.
I mean, that's such a lovely shift too, to be more aware of the relationships that you're developing, having it feel much more intimate than it does like objective or something like
Yes.
that. And that's a difficult shift to go
Right.
through too.
Yep.
Yeah. Creative thinking, right? Like you forced into like different ways of being.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And I love honey nays. I mean, I feel like sometimes if I feel like a little down or if I feel a little like wandery,
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
yep. I find myself gravitating to wanting to go to Honey and Ace to explore
Yep.
and discover, and even the colors inside there just feel so energized in a way
Yes.
that doesn't
Yeah.
feel heavy, or I don't know. Sometimes when there's a lot of colors, it feels a little
Powerful.
Yeah.
Overpowering.
overpowering.
Yeah,
Yeah, something
totally.
like that.
Yeah.
Which I think I tend to be sometimes.
Oh,
So I'm always
too.
looking. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's nice to like go into an environment that feels like, oh yeah, it breathes itself.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And naturally so, not only because there's like a lack of people out and about right now, which I enjoy.
Right.
Because as social as I want to be, I know I'm like the number one introvert, like in my heart of hearts. Like
So funny.
that's just where I want to be. It's just like in a dark room by myself. That's where I feel the most at home. But I will help create environments for others to experience with me that I
Totally.
think kind of bring down energy or lift it up to, I mean, whatever your personality or your mood is at that certain point in your life. I think the use of pastels and muted colors and like kind of this kind of whitewash over all of the finishes that we have inside of the shop. I definitely did that on purpose, and I don't really know why I initially gravitated toward it, but I think the more time I spend in the space and the more I realize like how extreme I feel like sometimes my personality is, like the back and forth between an extrovert and an introvert, and just like wanting to escape from reality but also have like a very stable reality, like
Sure.
yeah, I think just learning that about myself, that those colors and the shapes and the rounded edges and the pairing between like a painted finish and a raw plywood finish, and just like all of the juxtapositions that I don't know why I was choosing it initially, even, although I mean, obviously I'm a designer, so I like I know what the end product would look like, but I didn't really know how it would feel to experience that space, like
Totally.
inside of that space. So
Absolutely.
it's been a cool experience just getting to like experience a design of my own, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a huge thing.
Yes.
And I can relate because in some way, that's how I, in some ways, think about my paintings. Is like I create them, and sometimes I don't have a true understanding of why I'm using what I'm using. Like the palette is kind of driven by not me in some ways. I know that sounds strange, but then to sit back and view, there's like an objectivity, but then you get to be a part of it.
Yes.
Like with it,
Right.
outside of yourself. So it has like a soothing nature or some sort of nature to it, whatever that is. But
Yes.
I'm not making environments in the same way, I think.
Yes, but your pieces do, I mean, they really are like a landscape that is inside of an environment that, I mean, anyone can create on their own. So, yeah, it's just like another turn down, like, reality, I guess.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
Yeah.
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 Ooh, this is so exciting.
Ooh. Yay. Aw.
I'd like to kind of turn into that space a little bit. Like, 'cause you started us in there because you do these commissions, you do this design work for people, what it's like to meet, understand, kind of pull things together from what you feel like, or see and are told about, experience, and then create something for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of, again, just kind of like push and pull and just listening to the initial kind of impact that a person has on you and what your gut reaction is to, I mean, sometimes it's like they're coming into my space. So it's really just like me dialing super in tune to like the way that they're having conversations with me, the types of topics that they're bringing up. So it gets really dialed in that way. But I think the more regularly scheduled programming for my interior design career is just going to people's spaces that already exist and are already a portrait of what they've created for themselves on their own.
Oh, yeah.
And then them explaining to me why they hate it so much. Like, right. And I'm like, okay, why does it look like this? Like, what are you... Are you incapable as a person to trust yourself enough to like just even like wander into a paint store and get curious about like, oh, I tend to gravitate toward browns over grays, or like just learning those things about yourself versus me trying to like draw that information out of the objects that you already have, and like it's a weird process. Yeah. And everyone is different just depending on how open or buttoned up they are. Sometimes
then style.
Just how they're dressed, how they're it's really kind of an assessment of like, I mean, very topically, like looking at the space and how they present themselves as humans and like their family environment. Is that the pinball?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yay.
Oh man. Wow. What a crazy conversation. I love this.
It's good. Yeah, right?
Yeah, totally. It's fun to talk about it. I mean, this whole year I've been like tinkering on and off of like, oh, should I dabble with like online therapy? I feel like maybe I should, because like talking about stuff is so good.
Right.
Why do I always keep it bottled up?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, this is awesome. Yeah,
and
I really love it.
I've been reading your blogs on Honey and Ace, and they are so delightful. Aww. I love them. Not only do I love the aesthetics of like what I'm looking at, but there's an excitement and an informality and a curiosity and I don't know. You seem really free to express like how you want to talk in your blogs, right? Which is like, I love that.
Yes.
But it's also really educational. Like I'm always learning something. I'm like, oh, the minimalist maximalist thing. That's really interesting that they're like in various ways very similar. It's just layering on top of, and I can just see those images in my head, and your words sort of live with me because it's not really super long. Mm-hmm. You attach so many images to it, and it shows so much personality about yourself and about the work that you do, and about how you want others to experience their lives and spaces.
Right.
And I find that's I think something that I really vibe with you on, and I love that you're excited about creating these like spaces that are going to hold people in a different finding them. Like it's like art therapy. I mean, it's not far from that therapy thing. It is very much like that
Boo.
Yep.
Boop. This is recorded, so we can just edit that out, right?
That's right.
Tom? Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. Wow. I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, but that is in itself, right?
Yes.
Just that train of thought losing is about the creative process as well.
Yes.
Creative process is messy. Talking about the creative process is not necessarily linear. We draw from so many different areas and spaces in our brains that we don't necessarily
Right.
talk about, like you just said,
Yes.
in an everyday experience or with other people. And so it does seem, I think, to the outside observer and maybe to ourselves too, when we judge ourselves, like, oh, I don't know, I lost my train of thought, right? But that's kind of how, that's because we're drawing from all of these like
Yes.
remote places that
Right.
is super cool.
Yeah, just trying to listen and dial into, everything else that is surrounding us. And just being cognizant that, like, even if you can't follow like one singular thought for more than 5 seconds, it's all right. Like,
It is. There's so
Yes.
many of us.
yes, there's a reason for that. And that's just your brain's way of just like telling you that it's time to move on. It's time to dial into just other things that are going on. And
Totally.
you'll piece together what you need to piece together when it needs to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really generous way of saying it. That was really nice.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do kind of, I think I am like dialing back to where I was with that thought though. Just thinking about what the blog has really allowed me to do as a creative person. I've always had some form of it. Ever since I think even during school, when I was in college, I started a blog, or there's always been some sort of form of like that expression of imagery, as well as like a little bit of like my thought and just like a quick hit of like the overall arching idea of where I'm trying to go with those images. I've never really been a person that like loves to talk super thoroughly about a subject. I think that, that's just not something that I'm able to focus on. It makes me anxious, and it makes me
Same.
as much as I like the idea of learning more and like being able to hold on to it and process it deeper, I think that's just not how I put ideas together.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not your medium.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you think of it as a medium, which it, for poets and writers and, visual artists and visual people, that's their medium is the
Right.
visual. And it, in some ways, transcends words. And how do you attach words that don't feel like they really fit, in a square peg, round hole or
Yes.
whatever,
Right.
things like that.
Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the blog is just a perfect way to do that. And throughout the years, I mean, it's been interesting working with a variety of different, either bosses or designers or just like the different people that I've filtered in and out of the career path that I've had. Just seeing the way that is approached by them, blog space I feel like that's just such a telltale sign of like how much you're invested in yourself and how much you're invested in the consumer that you're trying to, or the person you're trying to connect with, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the number one place for me in my mind. Like, this is where I get to say whatever I want to say and however I want to say it. And no one can speak otherwise, and that you can choose to read it. You can choose to like read a sentence and stop reading it. Like, it gives you the opportunity to tap into my brain as far as I'm willing to like take a big idea. And that's it.
I love that. I love it. And I don't really like a lot of blogs.
Yeah.
I am.
Yes. I've had a hard time.
Yeah.
I've had a hard time, kind of dialing into whose blog style I'm really drawn to.
Yeah.
Because I still don't really have any like influential people that I could say are doing the same sort of things that I'm trying to present on my platform.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a weird thing or like,
Well, I think it
I don't know.
speaks to, what you said earlier about like really trying, like having to trust yourself and to find your voice and to create these things that make sense to you,
Right.
like in your path, in your way,
Right.
influenced by self. But
Totally.
yeah, I love that. It comes through.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It is really cool.
Yes. I think it is. The blog is really my number one place to escape in a professional, creative, fun way that I still feel like I can tune into my audience in the most genuine way possible. But yeah, just it's kind of like the opposite or the reflection of like the everyday where I'm trying to tune into someone else's way of thinking and then change my way of thinking to fit theirs. So yeah, it's like this is the most genuine picture that I can paint of myself and how I would choose to express and like design a space 100% the way I wanted to.
Totally.
Which I feel like I'm beginning to understand what that feels like. There's one or two projects that I'm on currently that are different customers of mine that really have given me that opportunity and trust me 100%.
That's so
and
exciting.
Yeah, it feels really, really cool. And it's like that has never really happened to me before. Like in all of the professional settings that I've put forth, like
this is a big deal.
Really like this past year, two projects in particular I can think of that really I feel like, oh, wow, there's not a single damn thing that I would change about this.
Yeah.
Because this is the environment that it was meant to be out of my brain.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
So,
I love that.
Yeah, it's really exciting to experience that. And I'm hoping that there's more of those opportunities in the future.
Because we've talked about like how difficult commissions are. And basically that's what design stuff is commissions.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because for myself, I think that there's that, oh my gosh, this is so hard. How am I going to wrap my head around it? I can't really connect in some ways. But then they kind of push you in a way that you're like, well, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yes.
And it's this magical collaboration, really, that can happen that where you're like, okay, that's not where I would have gone with this. I was done, and now I'm not done.
Totally,
And, I think that the end product, spaces, it can be really kind of beautiful, but very different than where you would have gone to originally.
Right. Totally.
Just fascinating, which is another whole journey.
Yeah, it really, really is. Yeah. And I mean, throughout I'll say the revision process with clients of like, obviously the first stab at a design that I'm throwing at somebody, I always kind of approach it with like a very like withdrawn, like I'm not connected to this in any way, shape, or form. This is my interpretation of how I see you guys and what you guys might be comfortable pushing your lives into.
Right.
And what you might want to play it safe on.
Right.
And then, I mean, from there, it's this conversation that continues of like just drawing on what really makes somebody offended and what makes somebody like really excited about seeing their space in that way, which is cool. Like the visuals that I'm able to provide for people really are like a really cool tool that like I, without having the capability of like illustrating, I don't think I would have the career I have. Honestly and truthfully, because just knowing the way that I express myself through words, it's not the most graceful, I feel like, ever, at least in my head. And talking about aesthetics and color and texture, and it's so abstract to pretty much every human being. And everyone's perspective is different. So really being able to throw that on a piece of paper for somebody and like give them the most realistic I guess like look into the crystal ball of like where the space could potentially grow to,
Yeah.
is cool to see people experience that, and like for them to kind of understand the conversation I'm trying to paint with them. And it tends to, I mean, it clicks with a lot of different people, which is cool.
Yeah.
So learning that the visual side of our brains and like having that capability or that language available to me is like
Absolutely.
so cool. Like I'm so thankful that I was able to go through school and learn those things and like be able to be educated in that world, because without the education, I mean, you can obviously be self-taught and grow into those things yourself, but I don't think there would have been that much. It would have taken me a lot longer to figure out where I needed to be in life.
Right. You got the tools that you needed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I saw my education. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The tools. I mean, you're talking about transformation.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yes. Alongside of coupled with like money and time and people's investments in their property, and just it's a whole weird balancing act of like, is this the right move for you right now? What is the end goal for you in this space? Is it for you to really enjoy, or is it for the next person that you're trying to get interested in your space to want to buy and live in? So it can go through so many different filters that it's like, there's a lot to, process in the beginning of a design project for sure. Yeah. I feel like we're going in weird loop-de-loops.
Yeah.
I like it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
No, it's good.
Where do you find, I also follow your Honey and Ace Instagrams and stuff like that. But where do you find your inspiration? What do you do to kind of find your own spaces of rejuvenation? And
Sure. These days, I would say it's me just like grasping at time and minutes and just like, just kind of like really streamlining how I concentrate my free time, I think. But in that free time, sources of inspiration, the everyday ritual of like flipping through Instagram, going online. Yes. I would not be able to live without the internet. Like, I'm just going to say that right now. Yeah. It's particularly living where we live in Wisconsin, in a small-ish town. We're close enough to Milwaukee, Chicago, Madison, but all in all, it's a small town, and we skew conservative, and it's just there needs to be some sort of quick release of that buildup every single day of we're all trudging for something good here.
Right.
Why am I here in this place again? I don't know. Other than it's my hometown and there's that really strong connection. But yes, the internet has done wonders for my brain, I think.
Yeah.
Just being able to just go on a 5 or 10 minute binge of
expansion.
Yeah, going down whatever couple of website clicks I need to go down, and whatever that happens to be that day, whether it's a music blog or a designer's website or just there's a couple really cool global trend focused websites that I'm on quite a bit, particularly when I'm looking at sources of inspiration for my blog. Yeah, it's really right now the everyday is so consuming with work and just the daily grind that that's really been my escape and my place of inspiration lately.
Yeah.
When I do have some time to just kind of stop and just pump the brakes for like a day or 8 hours or whatever, I would say I'm always thinking about being outside. So I'm just like, I don't care where it is. I tend to want to explore different spaces when I have a longer opportunity
Yeah, that makes sense.
on hand.
Yeah.
So going on a hike in a state park or just like visiting a part of the shoreline that I haven't seen before along Lake Michigan, like, yeah, just taking time to breathe and just really feel that release. I think that's the easiest and most obvious way for me to disconnect and to tune in to just like a calmer state of mind, I think.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think there are words for that, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah, feeling that disconnect is so important.
Yes. Yeah.
For so many reasons.
Right. Yeah. But going back to kind of like the inspiration side of things, I would say that for whatever reason, I mean, I don't know if it has to do with like the upbringing that I had and the background in like music and dance performance and all of that, but like in general, I would say I draw probably some of the most. Oops.
No, keep talking.
Some of the most, the largest pull or pool of people that I feel like I am always leaning toward are musicians. So like world of music and just like seeing how sound can affect your everyday, and that in itself is a very abstract thing as well. Like
Totally.
There's nothing really to like dial in and like tactily like just grasp a hold of in music. It's like all about what you're experiencing on the inside when you're listening to something, and the feeling that gives you. So I think, just music in general has always been there for me in different ways, but yes, and it really has influenced, I think, the type of people I surround myself with and the people that I'm gravitating toward, just pretty much like nonstop.
Right.
Yeah. So music in general has just always been this huge, like, had this huge clutch on my brain. And that's really like transformed like my partner, Charlie. He has a huge, I mean, like his whole world is music, and just he's dialed into so many avenues of where that can take you and the different skill sets that you need for each type of performance or however you're trying to make that happen.
Yeah.
I think the complexities of the world of music and where that can take you is something that I've always been really drawn to. Just the flexibility that it holds, I think.
Interesting. The flexibility that it holds.
Mm-hmm.
So, welcome back. I'm Erica Hunsinger. We're here with Jordan Gottsacker, and this is In the Act on Mead Community Radio. So, before we left break, we were like kind of dove into music and how those spaces influence you, the inner,
Yeah, just the the vibes and the different frequencies that can like set in you and just like say all the things it needs to say without actually saying anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was really amazing to me when I started listening, seeing what Cooper was bringing with CDs and reading about, like, almost all of the music he was listening to had like abstract pieces featured on the front of the CDs, and then inside were like amazing explanations about the abstraction of music and what they were doing and how they were doing, which related so much to me in my work that I felt an immediate connection to that work because of it. And I don't think I had before that in those ways with that particular music, but music is so important. Do you listen to particular music when you design? Do you shape your design time with music that is responsive to yourself or to your clients? Like, how do you? Cool. Yeah,
I should start doing that. There was one client that I had that one of the parting comments that they said to me as I was meeting them for the first time was like, hey, if you have a sec, just go check out this playlist on Spotify. I think the vibe is really what represents us and what the persona or whatever we're trying to create inside of our house, what we want that to feel like.
Oh.
So that was a really cool, was a really cool instigator of like, oh yeah, there's other textures and like inspiration sources that I can tap into.
Yes.
Yeah, and turn my brain on that way. So yeah, yes, I should tap into that more. I should just always ask my clients, hey, what sort of music do you like to listen to? And that would be honestly a really good icebreaker. And right, like, but also the results and the responses of that, I don't know if I could handle.
Right. Right.
Just, yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, it is in some ways, I think of art a lot like food.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Your tastes are like food. It's not everybody likes the same kind of food, or then maybe they like the same food, but the spiciness is different.
Sure. Yeah.
And what is it like? You have to taste something like 6 times on your tongue or taste buds before you understand or can integrate a new thing if you don't necessarily immediately like it, which is a fascinating thing. And I feel like that has a lot to do with art as well.
Yeah.
And spaces. And I'm constantly surprised by going into spaces or seeing things and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. And then sitting back with it a little bit and going, maybe I was wrong. I actually do like that. That's fascinating. And that sort of like creative or responses to your environment or to what you see or hear.
Yeah.
And then how it influences you.
Yes. Yeah. I guess going off of that, I don't know why my brain is thinking about this, but just that really resonates with me on a lot of levels. I think just knowing, again, like we're in a small town in Wisconsin. This is my hometown. I grew up here. I chose my initial gut reaction of living in a small town and being kind of like forced to belong here, I guess, was to immediately leave this place as soon as I could and just go see what else was out there. And I always thought that living in a bigger, more metropolitan place would probably be a better fit for me. And it would just give me the opportunity to experience life and culture and conversations that I was wanting, or that I knew there were different perspectives that I wasn't seeing. So I feel like having that as kind of my gut reaction to living in a small town is like very interesting to me now that I've lived away from Sheboygan. I've lived in Colorado. I've lived in Minneapolis. And then dialing that back into Sheboygan after those experiences and learning about like, you don't need to be from the biggest place and you don't need to be from like the most hip liberal, like cool, up and coming, whatever. Like
Yeah.
you have the option to paint whatever sort of a environment and place you want to live in. And that's really what Honey and Ace is like trying to do for Sheboygan, I think. And it just feels like that's the most honest way I can live as a human. So,
I love that.
yeah, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, all the pieces, like, it took a while for them to click and for them to feel right.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, no matter what, you're going to feel like you're probably stepping out on a ledge and like just taking a huge risk. Like,
Yeah.
but I think that's what living calls for. Like, I have never been one to want to sit in the same place and just do the same thing and
Right.
just rely on old habits, I guess. Yeah. So just really listening to what sort of evolution you need to go on as a human and
Yeah.
tapping into that and just trying to showcase and highlight that for other people is really important as an artist, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
And, we talked a little earlier, like I think that's my sort of momentum too, I think for life is like, how do we share these experiences with each other to fortify your strengths, and that your strengths can also be your weaknesses and your weaknesses can be your strengths, fascinatingly.
Right. Yeah. It's all
And that you
situational.
Yeah. And try and follow those voices, like move towards the doors that you love.
Totally.
And it's because it's so hard life is so complicated and can be so complex and difficult, but keep trying to take those risks.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And ultimately, it just does come down to like trusting yourself and just feeling out what the situation calls for at that time. Like,
Right.
yeah, it's not always going to be the same answer.
Right. And finding the people or things that you connect to. Like you said, music is one of those things that is a deeply influential.
Yeah.
But also gravitating towards people that support and allow for those transitions and movements to happen.
Right.
Hopefully without a lot of judgment.
Yeah, totally.
I think we judge ourselves so harshly sometimes that it's like,
Sure.
how do we?
How do you get out of that headspace?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard for me for a really, really long time. And I feel like this past year and a half of owning this business and getting to experience the world exactly how I wanted to experience it, even though shit was hitting the fan and like there was nothing that we could do about it.
Right.
Like, so it's just, go with the flow. Like, grow with the flow, as I like to say.
That.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Totally. And trust yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you had like your perfect idea design, like space, or, you said you think big, you tend to think big. Like what could you kind of imagine? Let's set the stage.
Oh, sure. Which project should I dive into?
I know, you could do whatever.
Yes.
It doesn't even have to be a project that you have.
Yeah.
Like, just like anything.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so many. I mean, there's so many little ideas and whims of things that I have sketched out late at night or in between projects or whenever, just like quick moments of inspiration that I feel like I just need to like put them all in one place because they're all scattered on different pieces of paper. But one of the projects that I feel like I was toying around with prior to opening a business, and it was like I was very naive and like didn't really understand like how much of an investment like buying a property and like just like all of the things that go into becoming an entrepreneur. I knew I was always gravitating toward that, but like one of the ideas that I had was just to buy like an old bed and breakfast and turn it into like a boutique hotel type of situation with like emphasis on like cool artsy gallery hangouts and like
Yeah.
live music and blah blah blah. Like there's stuff going on there like 3 or 4 nights a week, and all the
Yeah.
rooms are totally decorated differently, and
Love
I can
it.
just go like crazy on this place. Like
Yeah, that sounds so fun.
yes, yeah. So really like this ultimate dreamscape of like there's like no consequences, no
Right, yeah.
clients, like yeah, that would be an awesome thing if that ever happened. But yeah, I think I do, going back to the inspiration side of
Yeah.
things, like I draw a lot of inspiration from travel, and like the idea of staying in a very like curated space in
Yeah.
general has always, that's really something I've dialed into over the past couple of years. So whenever we do start traveling again, or whenever that happens, I
Yeah.
feel like, yeah, just finding little boutique hotels or like really cool little pockets of weird that only exist in that particular place.
Right.
I think just creating just one-off environments is a really cool theme that I
love
want to keep like exploring and
For sure.
getting into. So it might not always look like a retail space or
Yeah.
whatever, but it's generally going to be just like I think the evolution of where I'm going is just dialing into just creating a one-of-a-kind experience for someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So
I love it that that you don't just you're not just finding inspiration on in the internet and stuff too, but you go to Goodwill and like
Oh,
little
yeah.
thrift shops and
Right.
find these quirky, wonderful like design
Yes,
sets and
totally.
or
yeah.
that your draw is from all these different walks of life and pieces that
Yeah. It's widespread.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know why I gravitate toward that, but yeah, I would say as much as we can marry together, like the high and low of life, like,
Yeah.
you can, I mean, have like a piece of clothing that you're really attached to for a few years, but like after you've worn it so many times, like, I don't know, you're going to have to move on and find something different and like
Right.
find something else that you can express yourself just as much in. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know where that.
No, that's
was
totally relevant. I
rolling,
think that's well, I mean, it's the Goodwill shopping
Yeah.
too. Like I'm wearing gauchos,
Yeah.
you know, or whatever they're called.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Flowy pants.
Yeah.
Yes.
those borrowed time space links. But so your medium though is not just spaces. You also do painting though too.
Oh gosh,
right?
yeah. I was hoping we didn't have to talk about
We
this.
don't. We don't have to.
No, we can, but
Well, I love the fact that you do that. You also make those beautiful wooden hanging, like
yes.
dip structures,
The
and
driftwood
you
pieces.
do these like in context. Your window wrapping
Sure. Mm-hmm.
wood pieces. Like it's not just found design or things that you piece together. You're like creating a lot of these pieces yourself with your hands, and what that means, and different
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
processes mean different things to you. And
right, yeah. I feel like I approach art in general. It's really funny because I feel like I've never thought of myself as an artist. It's like a really weird thing that I I don't know how I'm ever gonna like see myself that way, or it's just a way of how I choose to, I mean, look at objects and look at things and couple them together and just
yeah,
try to cobble together a cohesive idea out of like everyday objects and slight alteration of them through paint or through wrapping them with yarn or whatever's around. And it usually tends to be like mostly everyday objects. Like I don't generally like to paint on canvas. I like to paint on wood. It's just like, yeah, just the little slight, just doing it or like leaning into those quirks, I guess, and like just finding the quirks that you can pull out of different objects that we're surrounded by constantly. Like, yeah. And then, I mean, it's usually slathered in like some layer of like pastel or like weird color combinations, so that gets distracting. But in general, the subject matter of what I'm putting out as an artist tends to be a heavy emphasis on like natural and organic, but like the alteration of that through like a substance or an additional like synthetic material, I guess. Yeah. What you're bringing to it. It's the natural and the Jordan.
Yeah.
The curation.
The curation.
Oh yeah.
I mean, but that's like the hanging piece that I don't know how you got that done so quickly. That's in Honey and Ace currently.
Yeah.
That whole process of wrapping wooden, like sun-drenched, what is that? Sun-bleached wood or something?
Driftwood pieces.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You got it.
And that the act of wrapping is such a soothing, repetitive movement that, you know, in some ways reminds me of music, of like having that sort of repeated pattern, and not all music, but can, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It was interesting, particularly with that display with the yarn wrapping experience. I've done pieces like that before, but not really to that scale, I guess. There's a lot of pieces that needed to be like incorporated into that idea. So yeah, just really, I mean, I think I ended up like maybe 2 or 3 days it took me to wrap all of the sticks. But yes, just sitting there continuously for hours, consecutive hours doing that is it was a really interesting change of pace and time for me to notice things about myself during that reflection point, because I mean, working with tactile or physical objects is a very different experience than working on a computer and digitally just like sitting in front of a screen and a keyboard all day, which is where I tend to be like 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, experiencing objects and just like the patience that it takes to develop those things visually. I think patience is like always kind of this thing that I'm always trying to like set as a goal for myself. So I think that art process in particular seems like a good way for me to practice patience.
Yeah. Oops, sorry.
And it's I mean, it's all a learning process. We're all just trying to be the best person we can be.
Right. For ourselves and for each other. And yeah. So that's it, baby. That's a wrap. I love it.
Just kidding. It's not.
That's even better.
Oh my God.
Jordan Gottsacker, everybody. Woo!
Thank you, Erica.
No, thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate you spending the time to think about and talk about and share your processes and everything about it. And how can people get a hold of you? Yes.
Yeah. We have, so Honey and Ace exists in real life. There's a brick and mortar right across from the Mead Public Library on New York Avenue, 817 New York Avenue. We also have a website. It's www.honeyandace.com. If you're looking to follow us on social, our platform is at Honey and Ace Design. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks,
you.
Jordan.
Yep.
In the Act is produced in the studios at Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. More information on the web at meadpl.org.